Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be building something pretty spectacular, and it's actually one of my favorite kinds of gaming PC, because on our desk we've got some of the latest and greatest and ridiculously powerful components. But I'm actually, I have to admit, most interested in this, because this is the Asus Prime 201. It is a micro ATX chassis, and I've built in this before, but this is the newer variant that actually has a window. So I am thinking that today we can build a gaming PC that not only looks incredible, but has a tiny little footprint and isn't really going to compromise you on anything. I can't stress enough how excited I am. So let's waste no further time and actually get started, right after saying a massive thank you to Asus for sponsoring this video. Oh, and you know what, guys? I've just realized I missed the best joke ever. I should have said that this video is going to be prime time, because obviously a lot of the focus of this is on some of the prime components. That's one of the reasons Asus actually reached out. And I absolutely love this thing. I can't stress that enough. It was one of my favorite cases of the year last year, and this is the new revision that I haven't tested yet that actually does come with this windowed side panel. And I love that, because the only thing that I didn't like about the other one was the fact that you had mesh here, which obviously was great if you weren't going to see it, but if you're going to put this on your desk, I would have preferred it to have a window so you can build something really neat and actually see inside of it. And with a lot of smaller form factor cases, the compromise really that you get is not only that you have less airflow, so you need more fans and they need to run faster essentially to get the same sort of performance, but one of the things that you'll find on a lot of rival cases to this is that it's really hard, or in some cases actually impossible, to route the cables around the back. So even if you did have a window here, it's going to be ridiculously difficult to get something that looks really neat. Whereas with this AP201, you actually put your power supply in the front side bit. So here, this little bar actually kind of hides all of those cables, but then you can route them through around the back. And while obviously you've not got as much space as like a dual chamber massive case, for something this size, you've still got ample room actually to manage the cables. So it does mean that when you do put that window on at the end, hopefully you're going to get something that is really nice and neat and tidy. But you've got loads of good airflow on this as well. Obviously you've got the front, so you can put a 360 rad, which we're going to do at the top here. And even though we're actually using a smaller graphics card, this is a 4070 Super Prime, but this can actually accommodate really massive GPUs as well. And as we start this, I'm going to put my psychic hat on for a second, because I know what you're thinking. You're going to say, hang on a minute, you've got an ROG Strix board here. I thought this was a Prime build. What's going on? But in actual fact, I've gone for this for two reasons. The main one is it's the one I had, but actually probably more importantly, the whole theme of this really, I want to prove to you that you can build something super high end without compromising on features, but still have it in a smaller form factor. So this is a great option. But if you did want to go for something a little bit more accessible, then you can actually buy a tough motherboard that costs around about £60 less in the UK at the time of filming. But I also like the fact that this is just a great looking motherboard. It's going to work really well with our window, and this will actually go with either a white case or a black case, because it's obviously got elements of both in it. You've got Wi-Fi support, which is really important. You've got PCIe SSD covers and things, so it will take two SSDs on the front here, which is nice. And obviously you don't have to be the most eagle-eyed viewer in the world to work out that this is actually an Intel motherboard. Yes, we're going for Intel, Team Blue rather than Ryzen. Few reasons for this. Firstly, everyone, well not everyone, you always get people whinging saying, oh, you always do Ryzen and you always do AMD. Well, here we are, we're doing a Team Blue build. And actually in the US at the time of filming, the 7800 X3D CPU is still like priced really high. Availability is a bit meh for some reason. So there's gonna be a lot of people that will want to go for the Intel rival, which obviously is this, the 14700K. But if you are gonna go down this route, do be aware that obviously there were some issues with the Intel 13th and 14th gen CPUs that have since been patched. There's actually, I was reading a news article today that there's another patch coming out with BIOS updates, essentially to keep them stable. But Intel have also given you a longer warranty on these chips, and obviously they've replaced ones that are faulty. Just be aware what you're buying into if you are going to go down the Intel route, but obviously gaming performance on this is amazing, and you do get all of those extra efficient cores as well. So if you are going to use this for sort of like general productivity as well, it's still a great option. But then obviously also be aware that these things aren't going to be the most current CPUs forever. So if you are going to be buying a brand new gaming PC of any kind at the moment, do your research to see how much shelf life is expected on these components before proceeding. Unless you need something today, then you don't have a choice. Moving on to our next components, we have our RAM and our SSD, and while most motherboards really that come out these days are actually using DDR5 memory, this is using DDR4, so obviously make sure you buy the right version. The one we're using here is a Viper kit, and this is running at 3600 megahertz. So yes, it is slower than DDR5, but don't forget that the latency difference as I say, in terms of gaming performance, last time we tested it, you can find this video in the top right corner of your screen, we didn't really notice any differences, but newer games are coming out all of the time, so maybe this is something we need to retest. In terms of the SSD that we're using, well, this is a fan favorite. It's a Crucial P3+. It's not the absolute fastest drive in the world, but it's more than suitable for what most gamers need. Let's open up this top slot, take it off, and then if you haven't already, remove the plastic film that will be here, otherwise the heat pad's not really going to do much. Then you can grab your SSD, line this up, and just gently push it into place, and then use their quick connector to secure it down, and then obviously get your heatsink, and then put this back on top. And then at this stage, you'd usually be tempted to get this inside your chassis, but actually because we're going for Intel and we're using an all-in-one liquid cooler, I would recommend that you actually get the back plate out of this now, and then install this on the box, because it makes it a little bit easier than doing it once it's inside your chassis, even though this is a little bit smaller. This one is called the Prime LC360 ARGB. From the box at least, it looks like it's got a pretty cool little pump head on it actually as well. I mean, manufacturers, regardless of who they are, seem to... Wait, I've got distracted. Have they done it? I think they've done it. They've pre-installed the fans! Yes, it's my favourite thing. As we know, I'm prone to
hating radiators.
But when they do this...
I love radiators.
It's just so much easier to install. Oh, actually no, this is not a component we should skimp over, because there is more to it than that as well. We actually have this like fan frame here, so you don't have all of these horrible connections to plug in. You literally just have your addressable RGB and then one single fan header. How neat is that? Turn it over, drop that through, grab these Intel 1700 spacers that are running away from me, and just put those on top. And then actually, because I'm going to be swapping out this back fan, I'm going to do that now. And then actually with this particular motherboard, you do need to remove this central stand off, but otherwise you pick this up and then you just gently line this into position, screw this down into place. And then believe it or not, once you've done that, you're not actually that far off completing this. I mean, if we turn this round, we can grab some of the cables that we will need. You'll notice that there is actually somewhere this little PSU extension cable. This obviously will connect to the power supply, but other than that, it's a pretty standard affair. Just feed the cables through to their respective positions, starting with our USB-C. Under that, you've got your USB 3, then you've got your tiny connections down the bottom right, and then your HD audio on the bottom left. I think the next thing for us to do then is going to be to install that CPU cooler. So what I'm going to do is remove this little, I can never say the word, is it a fascia? Fascia? The face plate here. Whilst we're here, we may as well actually remove the PSU cover as well. It literally just comes out, it's this little shroud that kind of will hold it into position, clips on and then secures into place. But let's take this out, and then you should see we have this very large frame that remains, which obviously means our CPU cooler will go at the top. Oh, let's screw this down. There, we can get this flat, take our cover off of our CPU pump, and obviously there is some thermal compound pre-applied, and then in an ideal world, this should fit down nice and easily. Whack the screws on top before then tightening with a screwdriver. Let's get these cables unbound and plugged in though. Your addressable RGB is right up the top by the RAM, and then on the left of that, you've got your CPU fan and your AIO pump header. And I alluded earlier that I am going to be swapping out one of the fans, because the one that you get, there it is, as standard, is non-RGB, which is absolutely fine for the normal version, but obviously with a window, I want to be able to see it. So this is a Mobius 120 RGB fan. Let's get this screwed into the back. And then having done that, I now think it's time to move on to the best component ever, the power supply. Very important though, jokes aside. This is actually part of the Prime range. This is the 850 Gold PSU unit. Gold, of course, being for efficiency, 80 plus gold. It comes with an 8-year warranty, ATX3 compatible as well. But let's whack this out of the box, shall we? And actually take a proper look. And one of the things that's quite interesting about this is that they actually give you two different kind of color schemes, really, depending on what you want. So if you want it to look black, then you've got two sides that are black. And then if you're going for a white build, then two sides are white. So I guess from their point of view, it means they can just have one unit. They don't have to have two SKUs and charge more money. It's just, as I say, one thing that will work for both. That's quite neat. Installing it is very straightforward, because you just grab the shroud and then you place it on top. If you wanted the fan on the front for optimum airflow for the PSU, then obviously have it this way round. But there's no reason you couldn't do it the other, especially if you're using like an RGB power supply, or you just wanted to get more heat away from the GPU up and out, then you could do it the other way round so the fan was in the inside. There are pros and cons to both, but this is probably optimal. Gently insert this into our case, and then as high up as will fit, you just want to clip this in so it's core on the front of the chassis. Screw that back down, and then you put that back on. You can't really see it at all anymore. This bit is a little bit fiddly, but you do need to plug the extension cable into the PSU. Then once again, remember that you've been a little bit of a numpty, because obviously you've got to get the power supply cables into this. It's going to be fine, but it would have been easier to actually have done that when I slid it in. And normally I'd sort of fast forward this a little bit because it's not always that interesting, but this is kind of the whole point of this case. As I say, you can fit a lot of stuff in here, but because you do have the ability to actually cable manage stuff around the back, you see already, just from getting rid of half the cables, how much tidier that is. And when I do the remaining, obviously they've got to come through the other side, but can you now see what a difference that made, all be like being able to move it around the back? And if your case doesn't do that, and it's got a window, it's not ideal. Like, nothing to do with the sponsored thing. I chose this case. They said use whatever. I love this.
I love radiators.
Our RTX is probably going to be the easiest one to plug in. The CPU doesn't look too bad, but it's obviously up here at the top left. I mean, actually, the thing that's going to help us the most with this is that this is a power supply that actually comes with these flat power cables. So when you don't have as much room like we do here, because all of them will be able to push down when you put that side panel on, you're not going to have to worry so much about bulging. So if you've especially gone for like custom cables or something that are really thick, I'm not going to say it wouldn't work, but it would be a lot harder. We have one thing left to go, and that is our RTX 4070 Super. We actually used this one last week, but we did use that with a Ryzen CPU, so it is going to be quite good, especially in something like Star Wars Outlaws, to do a little comparison so you can sort of see the difference really. But anyway, I don't know why we're talking about CPUs when we have our RTX 4070 Super on the desk here. And okay, I see what this is all about now. I mean, I did anyway, but actually being so used to like picking up massive graphics cards, I must admit this is really refreshing. I mean, it's just over 2 slots. That looks like 2.5, but that is tiny comparatively, of course. I mean, look, here's my head. About the same size. And I know, by the way, oh, that is a shocking peel. I know, by the way, that a lot of you are probably watching this thinking, oh, 4070 Super, I would love one of those, but it is a bit outside my budget. Well, how about we give away one of these for free? Because actually, Asus, when they reached out, they said they will have one of these 4070 Super Primes to give away. And I'm going to do this over on Instagram. So if you don't already follow me, go over. It's just at PC Centric, and you can learn all of the details there, along with the terms and conditions. One of these could be yours. That was a fart. Will Asus want me to put that in the video? Last things last then, all we need to do is remove the top 2 PCIe slot covers, and then we can pick up our RTX 4070 Super Prime graphics card, and then line this up with a slot and get this fitted. And yeah, okay, this, do you see what I mean? This is comparatively tiny compared to most of the third-party cards that we use. And the cool thing actually in this chassis is that it's then allowed us to have loads of fans, 360 rad, and not have to worry about compatibility, because whilst you can fit really big GPUs in this, obviously you do have to be aware that your power supply is here, so you can move that up, but then that's going to restrict you with the size of radiator that you can use. So you could either go for an air cooler or like a 240 or something, just so that you're not having that restricted, and then go for like a massive GPU. Plug our GPU in, screw our bar back into position. If you did want to put extra fans down the bottom, by the way, you can fit some 120s. And then I will spin this round so you can actually see what we have on offer here. And yes, there are tie down points and things. So I've already used one, but obviously you can grab some zip ties and then get these like nice and safe and secure. And hopefully this should just fit on like that. A minuscule amount of bulge, but nothing serious. Again, the thing I love about this is just how it comes out so nice, neat and tidy. I mean, all of the cables are kind of pushed all the way that way, and then they're hidden behind the bar. So even once we put the window on, you're not going to see anything. I mean, how many cases do you know that will actually look this clean without you having to buy special cables, or actually a fair bit bigger than this? This is small, this is powerful, and hopefully it works. Don't forget, of course, that we are also going to need to update the BIOS for this. I believe actually that depending on the exact version of this board that you get, it might be running an older BIOS that doesn't actually support 14th gen, because this board is actually older than those chips. So you're going to have to do these steps anyway. But when we turn this round, you should see this little button here that says BIOS flashback, and then there's this USB port that's kind of highlighted. Find the latest BIOS, put it on a FAT32 drive, and then you just want to whack this in the back, and then the green light starts flashing. When it's done, it will stop flashing and you're away. Oh, the light's gone out. The light has gone out. My mother was sending me some houses she's interested in. That is not relevant. Well, I've got some action. I can't actually see it, so let's give this a spin round. Oh, there we are. BIOS says updating LED firmware. This is why I want a display on it, so you can see this without panicking, essentially. Right, I think it's done. So does this mean it works now? Come on, come on. I see a logo. I'm claiming that as a win. I've probably done about 250 PC builds at this point, and I still get nervous every single time. But let's press F1 to get into our BIOS, and then in this quick page we will enable XMP, which obviously gets our RAM to run at its 4 rated speed. Then we'll go into the advanced mode, find Q fan control, and then we can actually either do the tuning with the automatic utility, which works well, or just adjust it ourselves. And then because I already have a copy of Windows, it should load straight into it. But of course, if you haven't done this and you've got a blank SSD, then you can follow my clear, easy guide that will show you how to do just about everything. And so then, ladies and gentlemen, as if by magic, here we are, all set up and ready to go. And actually, this is the first build I've done in ages where I haven't had to make any other tweaks whatsoever. Literally just updated the games and we are here. And yeah, I'm really happy with this actually. We've got a peel to do. Wish me luck. Oh! But yeah, I absolutely love what we've got going on here. It's slim, it's powerful, and as we'll show you in just a second, it is very, very quiet. Let's jump into the games. And if you are wondering what this absolutely stunning title is, well, this is still a new one for me. There are so many games, I'm trying to get through them as quickly as possible. This is Ghost of Tsushima. This is around about an hour or so into the game, so not very far at all. Running through the forest, so I think this is one of the more intense bits, really, but obviously you are going to get some variability. And we're currently running this at 4K with DLSS set to performance, very high preset, and as you can see, we're getting a pretty sky-high frame rate actually of around about 92 FPS. And this is without using DLSS frame generation as well, so if you did want to get nearer the 120 FPS mark, you could just turn this on and then it actually uses AI to sort of render frames with AI in between the normal rendered output frames. So it's definitely cool tech, definitely worth experimenting with, but obviously do be aware that we've spoken about this quite a few times, but again, just to get your head around it, if you use DLSS Super Resolution, which is the one where essentially you're upscaling your image, that decreases the latency. It's going to make the game feel more responsive, whereas when you use frame gen, it can add a little bit of latency penalty as you've got more going on essentially to give you that smoother image. And yes, it can like add a small amount of latency to the game. But if we look at frame view at the top right corner of your screen, you will see that our latency at the moment is around about 24 milliseconds. We're fine frame generation and we'll turn this on. And then you should see at the top right corner of your screen, as expected, our latency has now increased a little bit. But again, say it before, say it again, magic number for me is around about 55 milliseconds or less. I can't really tell the difference in a single player title. Our frame rate's now around about 115 FPS, so this is going to be an absolutely beautiful way to play this game. But let's now move on to one of the most intense games on PC, slightly controversial. This is some Star Wars Outlaws. And as with the video that we did last week, I have tweaked some of the settings around to get rid of those black bars. The Ultra preset that we're using here on this 4070 Super actually includes quite a lot of ray tracing as standard. So I would say this is actually pretty well optimized. Bear in mind the 4070 Super is obviously a very, very high-end card, but bear in mind we're playing this at 4K DLSS performance with frame gen disabled with ray tracing. I think is not too shabby. 80 FPS is pretty much going to be that sweet spot between being able to show you all the visuals that you actually want while still having a really nice smooth game that is obviously a pleasure to play. To show you exactly what I mean, I'm going to go into the settings and then we'll find graphics. We'll then hit advanced, and then as we scroll down, as I say, this is all determined by Ultra, but here you can see our ray tracing is actually set to high, medium, high. Now don't forget that if you want like ultra ray tracing, if you like, you can also use the NVIDIA feature down the bottom, and you can almost think of this as like ultra ray tracing, as essentially it just increases the quality even further. But obviously this is going to be very intense, and as we discovered last week, it does add a fair bit of latency to the pipeline. So the best way of testing this, I think, is actually going to be to set it to 1440p. To ensure the best quality though, I will go to DLSS and actually change this to quality. And then when we return to our game, as you can see, our frame rate has actually dropped slightly now. It's gone from 80 to around about 64 or so, but it's not necessarily night and day. But as you can hopefully see, the quality of the lighting has definitely stepped it up. I mean, everything just looks a lot more realistic now, but with a latency of about 30 milliseconds or so, you've not got to choose between quality and the way that the game feels. I'm interested actually as well to see what happens if we now turn DLSS frame generation on. And actually this has made a pretty huge difference, and I'm really pleased to say that again, the latency is still where we need it to be. We're looking at around about 44 milliseconds or so with about, what's that, 90 to 100 FPS. So this is definitely going to be the sweet spot. I mean, if you have a 1440p display, you're going to absolutely love this GPU and you're going to love this overall system. I mean, actually, this is probably quite a good time to do our noise test. And then from one ridiculously intense game to another, this is some Alan Wake 2. This is a title I absolutely loved earlier in the year. If you haven't played it yet, highly recommend it, especially if you can get it in a sale. Really enjoyable. It's a bit weird, but I love games like that personally. And as you can see at the moment, we're running this at 4K DLSS performance Ultra, but ray tracing is off in its entirety. And we're currently getting around about 72 FPS or so. Frame gen is currently disabled. But let's go over to our options menu, and we will turn ray tracing to low. And then when we return to the game, well, as you can see, it definitely looks a lot better, but our frame rate has certainly taken a turn for the worst. I would not advise playing the game at around about 35 FPS or so, but this is just what really intense ray tracing will do to your system. As I say, Alan Wake is one of the best examples, but it is incredibly demanding. So we'll set this now to 1440p and see if that makes any difference. And then when we return, what has that done? Well, it has obviously now increased the frame rate to around about 47 FPS or so. This is without frame gen, so you can of course turn this on if you do want to get even higher frame rates, but again, be careful of the latency. And this is going to sound or look like I'm trying to hide something, right? Because frame views disappeared. I don't know why. I can't seem to get that to work in this particular title, even though I've had it running loads of times on other systems. It's weird. Maybe I just need to reinstall it or restart the PC or something. But from experience, even with an RTX 4090, if you want all of the settings turned up to max, frame gen, I find, does start to add a little bit of a latency penalty that I can feel even with a controller. I mean, for reference, if you do turn DLSS frame generation on, this is the frame rate you can expect, around about 85 to 90 FPS or so. But as I say, you will now start to feel it a little bit with a latency, but this is a slower paced game, so to be honest, this is probably not a bad way to play. But ladies and gentlemen, I now think it is time to drop down into the most important game ever, and I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but this is actually probably the game I play more than anything else. Don't say anything, no build is great. This of course is some Fortnite, and we've got this running at 4K, not absolute max settings. This is set to epic, but with the nanite virtual geometry turned off, because that tanks your frame rate and it doesn't give you any benefit really other than visuals. But obviously this is a multiplayer game, so bearing in mind this is 4K, or at least 4K with DLSS performance, this is a really great experience. And actually on a monitor like this, it's pretty much the perfect combination, because this is what, 144 hertz actually, so we're pretty much getting the most out of it. Obviously you can use G-Sync as well, and if you are like me, a keen Fortnite player, I think you're going to be really pleased with the results. I got cocky. I thought, you know what, I can easily win this game. It's not even ranked. I'll just quickly get to the end. And I ended up showing myself up. But anyway, this has been a pretty epic little system. It's pretty much taken everything that I loved about the mesh version of the AP201 and then just made it visually way better. I love the aesthetics of this. I love how small it is. But let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think of smaller systems like this? Do you agree with me that the windowed version of this is the ultimate one? We'd love to hear your thoughts, but smash the like button if you've enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and we'll catch you in the next one. Oh, and affiliate links to everything are linked down below.